mountains and hills breaking forth in song, trees clapping their hands. I can understand humans shouting in joy and clapping their hands, but what is all this nonsense? It's so over the top, so ridiculous and implausible. But it also feels absolutely spot on when it comes to understanding the relationship between God and creation. Now, I know that the colorful and dramatic images in the reading from Isaiah this morning are not meant to be taken literally. The writer of this book is using poetry, metaphors, to describe the kind of joy humanity and all of creation will experience with God's love in control. Historically, God's promise of enduring and unconditional love was made to a people who had just been exiled from Judah. There is pain right now, people of God, Isaiah has told them earlier. There will be suffering. The separation from the holy places of our ancestors, from the promised land, will not be easy, and it won't be over quickly. But there is a promise and the hope that the promise brings with it. It's a promise that applies to us today. Moisture falls from the sky as snow and rain. The sun shines, seeds are sown, grain is harvested, bread is eaten and shared, and life is sustained. The ongoing process of growth and transformation continues in the world around us and within our own hearts. Isaiah's dramatic image resonates deep within me. The Santa Catalina Mountains and its foothills are part of my identity. They may not move an inch when I return to the Tucson Valley for visits, but my heart sings. And there are trees, too, in that valley and on those mountains, trees that are not native to Wisconsin, ponderosa pine, mesquite, and palo verde. And instead of fields of grass, there are creosote bushes, wild poppies, and cacti. There is a beauty and grandness to creation as I experienced it in the Sonoran Desert that brings me to a state of awe. And remember that word, awe. It's going to come back later. And from the psalm, water in any desert is a precious commodity, whether it's the hot deserts of Arizona or the cold deserts of the Dakotas. Streams in the desert, springs of water that provide small pools of fresh water are vital to life of any kind, not just human beings. The good news about streams of living water that brought life to parched and suffering souls made a lot of sense in a landscape like the kind where I grew up, where water was both necessary for life and mostly invisible. From the very beginning of human settlement of the Sonoran Desert, people were grateful for the water that sustained life. Their gratitude was openly expressed to God, whatever names for the Creator that they used. Remember that word too, gratitude. It's also going to come back. Now, if we pull our eyes and ears over to the Gospel of Matthew and the parable in today's reading, we also find soil and growing things and a story about the abundance of God. At least that's the way I see it. After all, the harvest from the seed of the word is described as 100 or 60 or 30 times the investment, an extravagant harvest from land with, less than ideal soil conditions, or seed sowed by a farmer who's pretty careless with a precious resource. Now, I have heard many sermons about how this parable shows us that we need to be good soil in here, good soil, so that the seed that is planted in us with baptism and God's word is nurtured, takes root, and bears the fruits of the Spirit that Paul refers to in more than one of his letters. Don't go live among the weeds that choke off our good intentions. Don't fill our lives with rocks that thin our souls so that the seed can't survive, and so on. Perhaps you have heard that sort of message before, too. Moralistic, cautionary. A message about building walls to keep the weeds and rocks out of our lives and souls. But what if there's another way to look at this? What if we remembered that soil changes over time? What if we remembered that soil itself is teeming with life? All kinds of life, tiny, tiny invisible forms of life that form a symbiotic system that makes the soil fertile. What if we tried to think about the soil in the parable the way the women and men who farmed land back in Roman Palestine did? The way careful, conscientious farmers and gardeners do now. So, the fields have areas full of rocks. What do good farmers and gardeners do? They pick them up and move them out of the fields and gardens where they are planting. What do they do where there are weed patches? Remove them too through whatever means they think best. Chemicals, cultivators, hose, or hands. And if we ask questions about the other hazards facing seeds, packed down soil or worn out soil, we will probably hear news about the ways that those who work the land keep their soil healthy and their crops safe. The soil is enriched, enhanced, nourished, and tended. This doesn't necessarily need to be a story about walls and boundaries. It can be a story about getting hands dirty to help the soil heal or become more productive. And then there's that other spot in the story where the seeds fall, the paths and roadways on the edges of the fields. What if those spots aren't just places for hungry birds to feast or where seeds will shrivel and die? Think about roads this way: the opportunity to travel. Many seeds travel long distances in our world, caught up in fur or the treads on shoes as animals and people walk by. Or they are caught by the wind and blown to fields far away from where they started. Invasive species, you say? Well, yes, obviously. God's word invades our lives, breaks into our hardened hearts, and heals our weary, scarred souls. The seed of God's word is an invasive species, yes, but it's one that we need, not one we need to guard against. And think about this, too. It may be that the walls we build to keep out the bad things can also keep out the good news. As the people of God, there is work to be done to build up the soil of faith. And that work happens both inside ourselves and outside in our communities. And it should be no surprise hearing me say that again in the sermon, since it's part of many messages. God's work, our hands. And if it's something we worry about whenever we leave the comfort of the sanctuary or our homes to do what God calls us to do, we need to remember that God is with us in this work. God is our partner, and we are not alone. There is good soil in our communities right now. Whether it's Hickston, Northfield, Taylor, Chippewa Falls, or wherever else you live, it is there if you haven't noticed it before. And since in this parable we are both the sower and the soil, perhaps it is you and me. But those other kinds of soil are part of our communities too. People who've been damaged or overlooked or have cluttered lives or so focused on achievement and winning whatever fight they are engaged in that they become blind to their own separation from God and other people. Where are we finding food for our souls? What are we doing to nurture and sustain the faith inside us and inside our neighbors? When we go out into the world each day, as Isaiah says, We can go out in joy and be led back in peace, knowing that God is going out with us to tend and nourish souls in need of nurture and support. As the people of God, as the soil in which God's word sprouts, grows, and bears fruit, we have things to do. But remember the two words I asked you to hold in the back of your minds: awe and gratitude. Creation, the universe of galaxies, stars, planets, and life, is so vast and varied, it is completely normal to react with awe. There are things about life, the universe, and everything that we understand, and others that will always be complete mysteries. Creation is an awesome thing. And God's love fills that universe, touching all life, including ours, and it is normal to respond with gratitude for the gift of that love, the gift that led the creator of the universe to become mortal, to die, and to rise again to show us the power of that love. This is a gift for which we are singing, dancing, and clapping hands in celebration. Let us take a Sabbath moment now to sit in silence and rest in God's word.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to give us a like and even a comment. And please, please, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel.